them out, took them down, put them out, took them down.
Yeah. So, trying to put them on Monday and then Tuesday was coming to it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, Central Avenue started supporting it by 45 minutes.
Well, I'm showing this upside down. I think I went on the other country, yeah, so.
Oh, yeah, okay, I got it.
That's the one with that.
So then it goes to big signal. There would be 813 cars for the day. From the time it started counting. Mid-second.
So you have to go back and stuff, taking away the time it started to the actual date.
Just about.
Well, that's the street.
Okay. I've got 2 o'clock, everybody. First and foremost, I want to call our meeting to order. 2 o'clock for our study group. As you all know, February 9th at a special Board of Selectmen's meeting, the Board of Selectmen tasked Bob Kraj, Steve Handwright, Roy Litchfield, Dan Butler, Kate Rieger, Bill Baxter, and myself to conduct a study evaluating the clean and wastewater systems and operations and make possible recommendations to the Board of Selectmen for consideration. I think we have a great group of volunteers, all with great background and experience in different areas. Some specifically from the hands-on WPCA, some from the hands-on Building Oversight Committee, and some from prior first selectmen, current first selectmen, as well as people now that Kate has experience on the Board of Finance. So that, I think this has the potential to yield some fruitful results. The question for us all today, I think, is first and foremost a little bit of organizational structure of how and when we're able to meet, and how we see this group going forward. I, for one, am somebody that I'd just like to make clear is I like to consider myself a numbers guy. I like to consider things with tangible, concrete, mathematical things. I know that in some instances there are more subjective things, but I think we have a very concrete operation that has a history here within our town in terms of the delivery of services for a portion of our community. I think that we all know that we've made substantial improvements over the years. We have a brand new wastewater treatment plant, expensive, $8 million plus plant. And with that, obviously raises the cost of doing business for WPCA. The folks on the WPCA are working very hard to manage that. So I think that we can have a fruitful discussion, as I said, of possible recommendations of how and where we might go. I think we know that we are currently in the second year of our principal deferral with the town. Our wastewater treatment plant debt service payment has raised the stakes by some total of about $197,000 a year. Of that, we are currently sharing in a 61-39% relationship with WPCA paying roughly $71,251 and the overall town contributing $45,554. The nature of that will change next September when our second year deferral expires, and the stakes will be raised again to the WPCA paying $120,447 a year, and the town escalating to $77,007 under the previously agreed breakdown. I don't think that's the sum total of why we're here. I think there's more to it. in us taking a fresh look at it, you know, with some perspective and judgment from past first selectmen and myself of an overview of how the existing operations work in the current scenario with third-party administrator, two actually, United Water and Water Planet. An evaluation of the way it was done in past years, where it was done in-house. You know, there was portions of the administration that were done in-house. You know, what are the pros and cons of that type of operation? What are the pros and cons of the water? What are the pros and cons of the sewer? There's a lot to kick around here. So I like to think that we all come with an open mind. Maybe we come to some recommendations that can ultimately improve delivery for our end users. You know, who pay rates to enjoy the simple ability to gain water and sewer services. Maybe it doesn't, but I think that any study that we do obviously is beneficial, because if we come to the table and we put our heads together and we say we're doing it right, then that's good, because it instills confidence in the people that are in our community. If we have a recommendation that maybe gets moved further along, you know, maybe it can be implemented, maybe there's costs associated, I don't know, but we can take a look at it. Maybe there's a different recommendation, I don't know. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about this in terms of possibly, you know, creating little subgroups, how we might attack this. But I think first and foremost is, do we have a mutually agreeable schedule, things that work for us, times, and you know, here we are Thursday, 2 o'clock, is that a time that everybody likes? Does it work? I hate to put people out of their daily job if there's a mutually agreeable time. Certainly don't want to, you know, take people away from their livelihood when possible. I'm here every day. Does everybody want to propose a schedule? Do we want to limit our activity to 30 to 60 days? Does anybody have some ideas about the level of intensity that we're going to get here? You know, I don't envision this to be a year-long process. I envision this to respect all of our family time and say that we'd like to put a specific limit on it. Does anybody want to enter into the fray? Let's start with Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Does that work for people? Do we want to meet on every other week or something like that for a couple months?
Thursdays are good for me.
Yeah. 2 o'clock is good.
That would be fine, but I'm not the only one here and I'm not working right now, so.
Yeah, I think meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on any day is somewhat problematic for myself, since I have a full-time schedule, which includes days and a lot of evenings. But my schedule's very flexible, so that doesn't mean that if everybody can meet on a particular day, at the end of the meeting and said, let's meet in 3 weeks on Thursday at 3 o'clock, I could lock it in. So I'm flexible in that regard, but it is hard to do a day meeting. It's either first thing in the morning or later in the afternoon is probably more optimal. I do think, you know, we should get everybody's thoughts on it, but I think before we set the next meeting or the next set of meetings, we gotta then double back to the item number 1 of the general goals and objectives and frame out the scope of the study group so we know what we're working against. Because if we do get some initial assignments out of that scope, we're gonna need to know that before we meet again, we've got something accomplished.
One Thursday a month is good. I think every other week would be a little tough. That
Okay.
too.
Yeah, I would just acknowledge that budget season being what it is, this is the time of year where we all are stretched to the limit. But that's fine with me. If we want to say, you know, we have this meeting and then we might agree to a Thursday 3 weeks out, you know, to design a float, some,
Pushing it back in the afternoon a little bit before maybe 3 o'clock, accommodate people like you. I'm flexible, but
Roy,
My schedule's open.
what?
I'm fine with the rule of majority.
Can we also, just to note on Thursday, we meet the first Thursday of every month, the WPCA, so it might be a good idea to maybe meet that Thursday, so we can take whatever's discussed, and talk about it with the committee, so it can give us some feedback about where Steve and I are at, or maybe that's what we work on the next one.
Meeting.
We propose something.
The 5th.
Yeah, so that, you know, that could be back up at 4 o'clock meeting here, and we could just grab some
Keep going,
eat,
yeah.
and we could just do everything.
Would everybody like to just say that we'll try to work Thursdays at later afternoon times, and that our next meeting would be on the 5th? Tentatively scheduled for about 4.
I will not be at that one, but other than that, Thursday, that's the year for
Well, let's try to pick a meeting, the next one, where everybody can be here. I hate to start off with, you know, the real first meeting without, one of the players here.
Would you like to
So let's
say,
just see what we can deal with that.
the 12th is fine with me, I'm always here. If you wanna move back, then 12th.
I know, that's why I'm just looking out to you. That's
goodness.
for vacation.
Which week, the week of the,
Well,
after Easter? After Easter or before?
I have the vacations after that,
Easter is on.
so. Yeah, yeah.
Dan, while we're waiting, what was the underlying reason for the development of this community? What's bubbling that created the need to do this?
we have, the acknowledgement of the financial considerations to do with the wastewater treatment plant. Studies that have been occurring in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the need to improve
No, it's in the
infrastructure.
week after that, so the 12th works. They have Good Friday off and they miss, they're in a week and I'm thinking like that.
So we're now at 4:12 at 4
So
o'clock.
4/12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just acknowledging that, we know that in the past, our ratepayers have always acknowledged that we pay high rates, we have a small user group, we've tried to improve the system. We know that the pressures of the tight economy continue to make it harder and harder, and we're not seeing, the commercial revival that we'd like to see because of the economy. But I think that just the acknowledgement of, hey, how do we do things better, and if at all possible, can we get people together to say, how do we do it? We know that the, cost of living increase is going up next year by, a substantial amount of money. And to be proactive and consider how we can go forward. The town did, submit on behalf of the town in conjunction with the WPCA a steep grant application to try to help that cause along, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, the state, other applications, went out. So, we know that, to deliver the services to these ratepayers, we'd like to think that we can help in some way, shape, or form. The question is are there other avenues to be considered? We know that we have a large plant that has plenty of capacity, 400,000 gallon plant a day. I think our guys could tell us that we're probably using 75 to 85,000 gallons a day, typical. Plenty of water capacity, right? But there's always that other, option out there, in terms of, codifying in our minds that the delivery service is being run optimally as it is, or perhaps, there's a better way to do it internally, or some blend, does the town help, do we revert to an old system, or ultimately is there, in terms of considering whether or not there's a third alternative or some other alternative that might consider, the possible disposition of some portion of the assets or not, ultimately what has to be considered is, you know, is there a way to deliver these services at a less expensive rate to these ratepayers? You know, whether it includes the town in some portion of that delivery or not. A recommendation would be, you know, something for all to consider, whether or not it was ever implemented or not. I think would be a larger issue for the town. I don't know the legal structure that would take to actually change that. I think that would be a subject for the attorneys to get involved in. But does anybody envision this being broken out into smaller subgroups? Some that might say, hey, look, you know, any blend of us two would look at delivery of the system in the existing format as compared to maybe a couple of us might say, well, maybe we could do an analysis of what might happen if we were to come in-house. Maybe another two of us might look at what might happen if, you know.
I think we have to do that, to break up into subgroups, to get a couple people could spend some time on narrowing down a specific item to bring back, while somebody else is doing another section, to get a lot more ground covered, I would think, to come to a final recommendation or suggestion.
Dan, as you know, I came forward to you and said, brought in a discussion document, and it postulated 3 scenarios. I called one the WPCA third-party management or the as-is proposal or solution. The second option being town fiscal employment and operational responsibility. And then the third option being the sale or lease of assets to a third party. I'm not presuming that those are the only options, but that were the ones that I could think of as ways in which we could do business. As you know, I put forward a suggested outline of what would be included in the way of information. I didn't consider it to be complete by any means, but it was a starting point. And I found when I worked on these things, it's easy to put up a straw man and then have people look at it for the exceptions or say, gee, I like this, I don't like that, but I'd like to add these 3 things, etc. Do you have a copy of that with you?
I did. Your draft, have you made any alterations?
I'll tell you what, just to be on the safe side, I may have diddled with it with a word or two. If Christine can copy that, this will, everybody will be looking from the same draft.
Do we have any financial detail that we can?
I do.
Rates, numbers of
Well, that's,
users, et cetera, et cetera.
I have,
Financial trending.
I have the financials copied for the last 3 years from our auditor. I was gonna request that perhaps, you know, if that's something that everybody, or the group that would like to evaluate present, we could get that from our
Yeah,
members.
in terms of, once we see Bud's document, when I saw the agenda, I put together thoughts of my own in terms of goals and objectives of this study committee, what they might possibly be. So, if it's okay, maybe I can hand this out, and get Bud's document, you can kind of go for it, and take a moment to read it, and see where we're going with it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies. 1, 7. I'm gonna go see Christine.
So we have 3 documents.
I think Dave wants one too.
Bud's and Bob's. So we have 3 documents.
Of course, the full audit is on file. Both my office and the town hall, and also with the town clerk.
We have rate comparisons with other
clubs have?
other towns, other private companies?
There are copies of 9, 10, and 11 of King of Kings.
Okay.
Thank you, yes, well, you know, I appreciate it, there's been this background.
I don't wanna get too much out of hand here, because Christine's not here, she's taking our notes in minutes. I think one of the things when I talked to Chris is that, you know, Chris King, being our auditor, that he always gives you his, cash analysis of the thing based on the fiscal year. He says there are certain years, for several years, he said, and I don't mean to be judgmental or anything, that WPCA has their net cash flow for operations has been negative for 3 years in a row. That actually changed this year, it was positive, the WPCA has made strides but that has come as, you know, obviously you have to increase rates, you know, so the pressure on those individual homeowners gets higher and higher. But,
Steve, I accidentally did do that.
you can see at the top.
Are they all?
Hi Deb. Good, how are you?
No, I haven't draft.
I do.
I see some similarities, I'm trying to read them both, because I see that they seem to be starting off being
Yeah, the
pretty
open
similar
issues are the
documents.
open issues.
You guys talk together?
No, we don't talk.
Before the meeting?
We may have to start talking.
Seems like you're thinking along the same lines. digested. Like you said, the accounts would go around the room. I look at them and I say that they're very similar documents, worded a little bit differently. You know, Bob's future options kind of covers the possible change in terms of town fiscal, employment, operational control, or possible disposition. The end goal would appear to be the same. You know, the strategies necessary to sustain, and Bob's possible strategy necessary to sustain a system of affordable user rates into the future, so that the infrastructure can remain operable and set the core downtown so that residential areas do not experience a decline due to future costs of maintaining. I think that it's just another way of saying, you know, how do we change things in the future to do it, whether it would be, you know, modifying to an in-house strategy or a different option. Bud, what did you think?
Well, I wanted to say two things. The first thing that I wanted to say is that while there are a lot of vested interests represented at the table and great diversity of opinion, I for one come here as a contributing member without the idea that's a preconceived notion of where this should end up. When I laid this out and talked with you about it, I saw as a foundational document here, the reason why there's so much information under the existing as-is proposal to be brought together, because in a parallel effort for the town to take it over, we want to make sure at minimum we recorded all the items in a consistent fashion that would be dictated by us taking over total ownership of it. Certainly as it relates to any option for lease or sale, a prospective bidder would look at this and want to know all the things that are contained in section 1. I thought this was a good way to do it, and as you know, because I shared another document with you today, when we get into the business of structuring this in such a way as to report out to people for consistency of application, I was also recommending a way in which we go about doing it so that people won't be confused by what it is we have to say when we finally get to a product, and I realize that's down the road. But I think agreeing on the task force objectives, having a common understanding of what we're going to provide in the way of information, is how, as well as how we'll deliver a finished product, is very important to having people understand that we did logically examine each of the options and were consistent in the application of what we did.
And I would just say that I think that anybody that's come to this committee has the larger interests of the town at heart, and that we certainly have issues surrounding our water system going past and in the future, and particularly with the wastewater collection system going forward. There are a variety of options that probably could occur to some, if not all of us. What preferred option would be is down the road, but I think we have to start with data, which I think if you look at these two documents, Bud's document is really a data-driven document. Until you know what you're dealing with, you cannot begin to move around the data and evaluate it and go forward. Until you know what you've got, you can't make a plan to go forward. The document that I put out was really what is just sort of a description of what I think needs to be studied. I think inside of it is the same study that would be driven off of these particulars. So we're going to describe the current system and what it is, describe the current wastewater system and what it is. So we're going to review how we do rates now and what they are and compare them to what other people do. Then we can say, okay, this is what we did, this is what we thought, this is what's looming over the horizon, how are we going to do it? Are we going to look at our operator costs, because that's what I tried to do under A and B, description will detail current operator costs. We've got to know exactly where our money is going, but we do with the water plant, and we do with United Water. We have to evaluate, is there something else we can do, i.e. possibly in-house. But regardless of all of that, if you cut some of those costs, there are some, I think, larger fundamental issues about what we've got here. We have a very unique system here. Because we've expanded the plant capacity, but the user base is small. In order to get the user base bigger, you've got to expand the wastewater collection system. As you know, that's going to be difficult with public funding. So there are things in play right now which are important. I think when we finalize the remaining funds in the USDA grant to see if those are available, which is happening next door.
It's right next door.
And that's only a couple of weeks away. And there may be some, there may be none. And, you know, we're on the DEP priority list for FY12 and FY13, and all that means is there's 1.2 million available to go down Cottage Street, 25% grant, 75% loan at 2% over 20 years. The question is, we're gonna access that? How are we gonna access that? Who's gonna pay for it? Is it townwide? Is it user-based thing? So, I think both of these documents provide the basis for maybe breaking out and getting some information together, so when we get back on the 14th, the 12th, we've got a substantial amount of material to chew on. And then after that, we need to really project, we need more information, and then project what the available options are and start to get them on the table so we can evaluate them. Because some people may want to go others ways, other people may want to go other ways, but whatever the group comes up with, I think any of the options should be clearly stated and able to be understood by everybody who reads it. So I think it's really important to do the group, be clear about what the group is doing, and for the group to issue back with it perfectly understand, to see where it goes.
I agree. I think that one of the things that I saw in your document was when you start off saying that, you know, Buzz is a data-driven. I think yours is a data-driven, and also you word it a little bit different, but when you start talking about a review of water rate user charges, you know, and what it is, it really is just applying the same thing to me. The, you know, I think the thing that I'd like to see in here, to make note of something that Christine and I talked about, is to ensure, and one of the things that we talk about in terms of bringing things in-house is the existence of the CompuTel system and the fact that what impact it would have to consider that, which from what I understand, it's not just one person or part-time. CompuTel, I mean, some people know at this table that CompuTel is the outsourced collection firm that handles the billings and the collection of money and funneling that money into our bank account. What exactly is entailed in actually doing that?
Is that the third outside source?
They're
We got two
actually,
operations in one.
United
place.
Water contracts with CompuTel to do their billing for them. They do the billing for
So-
United Water.
They do
right,
the billing
or
for
the
the,
WPCA.
yeah, they do the billing
Yep.
for the water and the sewer.
Yep.
It comes out of the United
Right.
Water contract.
Yeah, but just to, I gotta throw in 2 cents. I talked to Linda, one of the major people down there at CompuTel, almost on a daily basis. And I think if anybody wants to get a real true understanding of what it would take to bring that operation in-house, you need to drive down there and just sit there for a day and see how many phone calls they log, see what they do, how they run things, and then you know basically what that takes. And then picture, do we have the space, do we have the equipment? Those things need to be taken into consideration.
Remembering
Just putting that out there
when
for you.
when someone calls the New Hartford WPCA billing number and the phone gets answered, New Hartford WPCA, it's CompuTel in New Milford.
In Milford.
You know, the average folks don't really know it's CompuTel, but it's certainly not here in town. It's not Mrs. Sheffield's downstairs in the tax
Right.
collector's office. It's down in New Milford, or Milford, not New Milford. And I sense that it's a larger organization with more than just 1 or 2 people, you know. Obviously, it's something to consider. Then, of course, we have Mrs. Tuxbury that handles billings with, you know, Chairman Fresh comes in and does purchase orders and things like that here. You have your, you know, Ted and the other fella from Water Planet doing call outs and things like that with Ron, which is that we get. there's a lot to be considered. The question for us all now is where do our hearts lie, and where does anybody have an idea that they want to sink their teeth into? Or let me ask you this: if we were to look at Buzz and say that was a data was, Bob, would there be anything that you would add from your document in terms to create a unified template?
I mean, I'd have to study it some more, Dan, but I think it pretty much, if we were to respond to these data points, you would have a pretty good idea of, I mean, because some of these aren't exactly data points. Some of them are question marks, like sewage acceptance. You know, when, if it happened, what's it going to generate? Debt services is certainly a data point. We all know what that is. You outlined it for us. We know what's coming in September of 2013.
Right.
We've got to make up 50,000 out of our budget, 70,000 that we're already paying, a major lift for us. The rate analysis, the introduction of betterment fees, we haven't set that assessment yet. We're playing with a mandatory hookup issue.
Discussed it.
And we discussed it. And so that there's nothing I would add necessarily. I think we should take a shot at filling these in so that they're quantifiable and so that we know what they are, and then make a good faith projection going forward, you know, do some slight inflationary thing, but we also need to know exactly in terms of the infrastructure. If you had to describe it briefly, the water infrastructure, from what I understand from the letter, is not in as bad shape due to the recent flushing. They didn't see as many things that they thought they would see. We all know historically from the WPCA, and I'm sure the Building Oversight Committee can provide additional data about the wastewater infrastructure, which I think is more troubling, I guess is the word for it. And so that those kind of hits to your infrastructure can blow any of these projections way out the window, way out the window. You might just one day wake up and find out you got a $1.2 million infrastructure issue that you didn't think you had. So some of it's going to be projections, some of it's hard data that we can capture right now. And on the running of it, I mean, one of the things that has occurred to me since I've been on the WPCA is that we don't have an underpin. In other words, we have staff here that have worked with us very well, hard, but they have jobs that are in addition to us. So we run around doing a lot of this stuff ourselves. Steve's kind of our plant foreman because he just happens to live near the plant. Dave's done the billing and collection with CompuTil. You know, we have other members.
You're here in town hall doing purchase orders.
And Kenny's
billing
paying the fire hydrants and, you know, and watching all that kind of stuff. So I think there has to also be some review of, since there's so much money running through the WPCA, what's it need, really, in terms of some underneath resources going forward to prop it up? Because sometimes you get a feeling like, you know, I mean, I must spend 15, 20 hours a week just talking to people on the phone, talking to vendors, talking to our guys, talking to the water plant. That's a heavy lift, I think, to ask somebody. I'm not complaining about it, but the next person's going to have to do the same thing if we don't change the way the thing is reinforced. I think that's an important thing to think.
To those items that Bob alludes to, that there may be some futures where there has to be a planning aspect to it or a guesstimate, I think that's where the idea of putting forward the assumptions comes. And a law of reasonableness says, like a betterment assessment, and since I don't know, I'll just make this up. Our projection is that we will invoke a betterment assessment. We think we'll have it in place by 2013. Betterment assessment, generally, we think will yield this amount of revenue based upon this and everything that we know. And that's what you run with. You haven't got anything else to run with but a projection at that point. And in other cases where it is, you have to make an assumption. You just state that assumption. If we as a committee can agree that there's a reasonableness to the assumption, I mean, we just go forward with it.
Yeah, I'll just speak to 2 points about what's going forward. There are 2 big points in terms of our 5-year rate analysis going forward. Point number 1 is what was just mentioned, the betterment assessment, and let's just call it the benefit assessment, which is the payoff of the outstanding debt obligation with respect to the expansion of the plant. We have run 3 scenarios. One is, I think, about a $3,000 per unit assessment. One is a $4,500 assessment per unit, and one is a $7,500 per unit assessment. David? 65?
When you say per unit, that means obviously a single-family home would only get that, but some of the commercial people that have an apartment building with 2 units would pay twice.
Well, they might play a ratio, for instance, we might do a ratio of 1.3 to that, but in a general sense, those are the numbers. Based on the user-based income that we have, and based on the user rate charges in place, many of the people that are on our WPCA consider both of those onerous, burdensome, and not doable. So we can show you the 5-year projections. You can make any set of numbers work to balance the budget. The question is, what price glory? What does it get you? Because if we raise them and we have more foreclosures and more non-occupied owner houses downtown, I think the downtown will degrade. And we don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that. The second thing is the orders to connect. Now, we finalized, finally, great expense and tedium, the 38 people on the system that have not hooked up, and did the research through the law firm that we retained about the process for the order to connect. It's about a 48-day process. When we discussed it, and I think you were at that particular meeting, there was a lot of blowback regarding it. And so what we are now contemplating is the following. Everybody gets an order to connect. We have 2 years to do it at the low connection fee that we now have in place. At the end of 2 years, there's a much more significant connection fee to bring them in. The reason I bring that up is because it retards future income in the short term. So it's the future income in the short term that we're all up against. And so whatever we do in the data, we will, in terms of the strategies and the choices, we can lay out choices that will work under any particular policy approach. The question will be, is it doable and is it fair, and how should it be allocated? I think you mentioned that earlier. There may be different ways to allocate it.
That have a high probability of success.
Yeah.
As anything is, in my past years of doing real estate, you could charge any amount of rent for your building. But if it's so high that your vacancy rate is 100%, then you're really not getting anything. It's all about the improving our odds for success, as opposed to actually estimating a realistic amount of income. So, that said, I think a lot of that goes to the option 1, present day consideration and evaluation. I don't want to keep us all here, until 9 o'clock tonight.
But we can generate through Bill Michaud, who has the data, and through we can generate a response to what I would consider a request for data off of this document and get it to all of the people in the committee. And it may not be all the data points, but it'll be a significant number of them. You'll know exactly what we have. We'll share whatever we've done to the committee. And then to the extent that other people have information that they're going to add to this, aggregate it, and we can have something to look at.
How do we see this going forward? Do we see subgroups built?
Well, I'm at a question before that. I used to think I was way out in front of this issue. And today, as I listen, I'm way behind it, and maybe that's my issue and not anybody else's, but I'd rather know a little about what's happening today, where are we financially, and what are the issues underlying where we are today as a basis for discussion, because I think we're going to head toward Bud's model as we move forward. But for me, I just need some more baseline information to understand the dynamics of the system and process today. I used to know it, I don't know it anymore, We have a new sewer plant in today that we didn't have then, so demands on the users have changed. And I just need to grapple with that a little more, so I am feeling comfortable with my baseline to go to the next steps, which I was at 5 years ago, but I mean, I'm not there today because I just don't know. And I've got to unlearn some of my preconceived positions because circumstances are different today, and I need to get to that.
And I agree, because his last knowledge of this is fresher than my last knowledge of this when we were just building the water tank. So I need to get some background information also. So if you could provide us with that, and email us, and get all the documentation and all the homework that we need to do prior to our next meeting, then I would feel more comfortable saying, that's an area that I would like to work on, and I would be willing to work with someone pursuing that. But right now, I'm kind of feeling like an outsider myself, which is good because I'm objective. And I'm objective because I do have a septic system, and my husband is on the water and sewer. So I'm in both worlds, so.
Well, quite frankly, Bill, that's why I put in A and B, the first point, a description of the current system and an assessment of the current state of affairs. Because we can't know where to go unless we know where we are. So if you've got Kate's got chapter 1, you've got chapter 2, and put the book down, we'll write chapter 3 for you. We might have missed a chapter in between. I think we missed a chapter.
I think my comfort with baseline needs to increase before I jump to.
Is what I'm hearing here is that before we go forward, we should all mutually agree on what the status quo is, and then segue to numbers 2 and 3, you know, or would it be
I don't
something
think
to?
how do you agree on the status quo? If they come and say, this is the reality, these are our figures, I mean, that's agreed, I would think.
Well, that would cover the financial side of it,
Right,
for
right,
sure.
right.
And actually, I have a question in regard to that to Bob. Roy and I have some knowledge of the collection system, but I define it as totally complete. Now, can we tell you our understanding of it based on that which we've examined by picking up manhole covers, by doing the videoing, etc.? Yes, and it will paint a perspective of certain portion of the collection system. And there is some additional work that Water Planet has done in their walkthrough, and we've even collaborated with them just so that we both had common information. Anything we learn, we share with them. They've done the same thing with us, because it is that we want to make sure that there's complete information. To that end, Roy and I could tell you what we've seen, give a report out on that. I mean, basically, that's what we've done for the selectmen in the past. And give you a flavor for it, and you know, from that maybe you can interpret what the rest of the system might be like. If you were looking to do something more formal than that, it requires a system analysis or survey where flow meters are put in, camera work is done on all, correct me if I'm wrong about it, we got like 14,600 and something feet of sewer lines. And for all practical purposes, we're talking about, we've only done in the hundreds of feet with what we have done. We may be approaching at this point 1,000 feet. I'd have to go look at it, whatever. Do you have any idea?
No more than that, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, that's, and to that point, but, and I agree with you, it's the unknown that is the troubling part. And that's why I put in my last sentence, study group will assess to what extent consultants are necessary to assist in completing its objectives and goals. And when I wrote that, I had in particular in mind the cammering and the flow meters of the entire wastewater collection system, because as we know, the old steep grant, the 250 steep grant, was broken up into 2 parts. So Brook Street has been accomplished. There's approximately $114,000 or so left to do the Main Street part, but, and I saw in the capital expenditures, it's going to exceed that in the proposed. So I know that, we all know that Main Street right in through here has got significant problems. We've been out there, we had the repair last summer. We know what's planned, so God, you know, if we're lucky, that's all we done. Everything else is hunky-dory.
Well, we could tell you this off the cuff, which is if you look at where it is that the sidewalk's been displaced for the work that was done on emergency repairs, and you go to this intersection over here, theoretically, on a planning figure basis, have about $400,000 worth of work in that short stretch.
But let's get back to basics. I think next, before or at the next meeting, I think the Water Pollution Authority ought to make a report. Where you are today, what you see the issues to be, what you think, where you think you're going, because that can be supplemented or discussed in vis-a-vis what the kind of data that you've put together that may lead us in a direction. But I think you guys, the commission, ought to be coming back and saying, at some point between now and then, here's where we are. Here's our assessment of operations today, and here's our assessment of the issues that we're gonna have to grapple with pretty quickly.
Yeah,
That
I think we
becomes
can
a
do that. I
baseline
don't
for
know that we'll
discussion.
be able to, I mean, essentially a show and tell.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that, and be happy to reduce it to a PowerPoint presentation if we have enough time to do it, because I think
That'd be great.
the understanding of where we are is crucial. There are so many people that have put this in the past, this wastewater treatment, and haven't appreciated what needs to be done on a follow-through basis to realize the promise of what that was for. There's amnesia, and that needs to be reinforced before we can go forward. So we'll do our best to do that, and to the extent that the BOC can, outline for us specifically what they found, what their projections are to fix just what they found. That's a key component of it.
And perhaps just based on the videography, what it would take to complete that system-wide survey, to get the other remaining uncharted lines documented, to really codify for everybody in town what's out there. When you talk about you guys really documenting the as-is, perhaps Christine and I can do a day trip to Computil to try to report back our interpretation of what they provide to the town that's the unseen, if we were to consider changing things. Just try to go down there. We know that the manual reading of meters, is one thing. Was it the water guy?
Alan.
Mark, actually.
Or Mark, their other employee, actually goes out and reads how many meters. But what happens in the unseen of the processing down in Milford and all that, how many people are handling it, what their days are like, so that if we ever did that, so that we don't wait another meeting to find that out. Because if we're gonna correlate data from the as-is into some hypothetical change, I think once we get tangible data from these guys to go forward, that would be kind of a variable out there that nobody really here sees on a daily basis, but we could go and report back, or I could go down there. Like Christine has a fresh set of eyes.
Again, toward that end, and maybe this is some additional advanced work that could be done. You notice one of the things that I postulated here on the sale of lease is determination of our right to sell by getting information back from USDA, Clean Water, DEP, DPUC, etc. Certainly there's no reason why one or more of us couldn't get that kind of data to find out whether or not one of the options is being shut down right out of the box, or there is something that says, yes, this is plausible, given that no one sees anything in the way of regulations or statutes or something that would prevent that from happening.
Okay.
I can tell you this only because I did one aspect of this. I talked with 3 engineering companies just to ask, is there an appetite within the clean and wastewater community for people who are interested in buying the assets? And the answer to that was, yes, they are. I didn't advertise that New Hartford is for sale. I just simply said, within the industry, is there an appetite for it? The answer to that is yes, there is.
So I think that is a huge policy point right there. There are many people that would always take the position it is not a good idea to sell the public water supply system to a private operator. There are many people that think it's a good idea and have it regulated by the DPUC. Whether anybody would be interested down the road, I think, is going to be a function of what the initial part of this study group reveals. The thing has major issues, for your buyer thing. And on the Computil part, I know Dave Rosengren is here, and Dave is, as I said, certain people take up certain tasks. He took up a major one for us once we became aware of the age imbalances, and you will see in CompuTel, when you go down there, and we have a report that they have given us, and it's not quite accurate because people still have until March 31st of this month to pay. But right now, we have an outstanding balance among the users of $75,000. And before Dave went down and implemented some systems, it was 88. So we picked up 14,000 in basically a month, and we hope to get that down. But what I want to stress is that it's a function of the economy. Many of these arrearages, people have chose during the winter to pay for oil or water, if there's oil. So that's what I'm saying about the user base. The more data you have, and the more analysis it gives you, the more it informs where you're going.
Yeah,
What's
that's what I'd like
what's
to
the
hear
aging
from
on
you,
that?
Bob, because
Overnight?
it gets us to the question of, you know, Bud's comment about, yeah, there is an appetite. I've done that research too. Of course there's an appetite. It's all about price.
And what you're
So-
buying.
And yeah, if you're buying or selling and how much. So, but I don't wanna leap that far right now. I think we should say, where are we, so we have a common baseline of where we are today, what are the issues facing us, and what are the various choices that we have to make. Rather than going, we got some choices to make. No, I'd rather get back on the baseline right now, because we're gonna get to this. But let's everybody get on the same plane, starting out within the next 30 days. That's right.
I don't have any problem with that. If we took it in that type of scenario, our next meeting would codify the as-is. We could start working on some relation, and then our next meeting would be, you know, after we codify that, what's the next step? Just take it one by one. That would be fine. We could start to do advanced work on, you know, number 2. Like I said, I could go down and visit CompuTel and start working on it. That'd be the next presentation. That would work.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to come to the next meeting when we have a lot of information that we say, okay, we all understand that, let's move forward. And maybe the show and tell could be a summary show and tell that summarizes information that's transpired to us in the meeting.
Okay. Roy, how are you doing? You okay with that?
Yep.
Steve?
No, that's fine. You have any idea how you wanna break it up? Who's gonna do who, or who's gonna do what, or?
You're doing all right.
Well, I mean, I hate to tell you, but it's
It goes back to you
a little
guys.
lopsided back to you guys.
In the beginning.
You know, in the beginning, you know, I mean, because you guys are at the intimate, I mean, both your subgroups, you know, Bud and Roy have some work, so I envision you guys at least getting together on, you know, obviously collection system reporting. You guys would have a significant input just because you're so into it right now. And obviously anything in terms of, I mean, I know you guys have been handling now the operational plan for a while, but then again, you guys also have intimate knowledge there also. So, but if we could just establish, you know, that discussion, and we can have talk about all the extras, you know, that you documented, Bob, in terms of those, you know, the specifics of the things that David's been working on in terms of those variables and the benefit assessments and the things, so that we have an understanding of, you know, at some level of what those assumptions are, you know, so that if we were to go forward, you know, when we're evaluating the data, then we can start looking at, you know, our thoughts on what would happen if you change variables, this, that, and the other, whatever it is.
What I'm taking out of this as an action assignment for us is, we'll give you a collection system summary as available information, meaning that whatever we know, we'll pass along.
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, you guys need to talk. So, we'll force that on you. And number 2 is,
Yeah, we have to.
the information needs to be complementary, not competing.
No, the
So
data
we gotta-
points are
we
gonna
gotta
be the
move
data,
to
there's
that
not gonna
level.
be any difference on the numbers. I just wanna make one final comment. As we go down this as a study group, we have to respect the independence of the WPCA, because we have ongoing relationships with DEP contacts, and ongoing relationships with the USDA, ongoing relationships with CompuTilt, through, for instance, Dave Rosengren. So as we go down this route, the study group should be sensitive to that. So as you contemplate, it would be nice to have some information from those people. You need to kind of talk to members of the WPCA involved in that. So we all know that that's going to happen. We can maybe tell you, don't say that, because we don't want to send a wrong message. Because we have a lot of balls in the air with some of these people. As I mentioned, the pending USDA thing is a very sensitive matter. The priority list thing is a very sensitive matter. Just staying on the priority list getting on and staying on is a major achievement for the state. So I'd wish just to throw that out. So as you go down to contact these very groups that are associated with us, let's just touch base before we do it, so we all know what's going to happen. So we don't get a call from somebody and say, hey, somebody's down here the other day.
Well, I mean,
So-
the relationship with CompuTill is
The
daily.
conduit to
Daily.
the office. your
Twice or
office,
3
right?
times a day.
It happens every day.
Yeah.
But I do understand that the need for tact and understanding. We don't want to lead anybody to believe that we're going down a road that is designed to specifically change any relationship with any of these groups. This is strictly a study that is going to be conducted to just give a baseline evaluation of if there is a way to possibly improve things. Is there something that we all can recognize that might help? So I think that you guys are willing to help us out with the as-is and the things, a lot of which you've just been sharing and throwing out a lot of data right here at the table. That'd be great. Bud and Roy helped to actually work it into the singular presentation of your portion of knowledge of that collection. I think it'd be great. And we can go forward with that first, as-is report, and then we'll move forward into the second step.
The only people that we'll be contacting with regard to the collection system would be to once again compare notes with Water Planet, which we've done consistently as we've done that.
We're know you're doing that.
Any of the people who've worked on the system for any reflections that they may have, plus our own observations at this point.
So, does anybody have anything else to add before we recess and adjourn to our April 12th meeting, 4 o'clock?
I would just like to thank the 2 gentlemen that prepared all these notes for us. It was a lot of time and energy and thinking, and I appreciate it. And your stuff is good too.
Thanks. As always, I think everybody knows how much is done by volunteers around here. We really appreciate the volunteers and just coming together. I think that a lot of times it goes unseen by our constituents in town. They don't recognize how much time is going in. I think almost not missed here at this table, but Kenny Croner was the chairman of the WPCA before Bob stepped in, was in the selectman's office on a daily basis, checking on things, out pulling manhole covers for these guys. There's a lot of people, and we appreciate David's work on the WPCA, all the volunteers. So if in any way our work as this group can help aid or improve things for those end users, I think it's a great thing. And I think that's why the selectmen obviously chose to support this type of stuff. So I look forward to seeing everybody the 12th, and thanks again for helping out. So with that, we'll adjourn. We'll call it 3:05.